You like it spicy, don't you, Clara? The words slipped from my mouth as I pulled out the folded paper from her purse, my hands shaking with a strange mix of anger and cold determination. Inside was a receipt from a downtown hotel room, 1 king bed, and a bottle of wine scribbled, with a note in her handwriting, "Can't wait for tonight?" My chest tightened, but I didn't let it crush me. I let the fury sharpen into something else, something colder. Ethan, the faithful husband, the man who believed in forever, was gone in that moment, and what stood in his place was someone who would not be fooled again. She came home at evening, smiling, pretending as though nothing was wrong, kissing me lightly on the cheek, asking how my day was, and I played along with a smile that felt like glass in my mouth. Inside, though, I was already building the pieces of the plan brick by brick in silence. When she turned her back, I memorized the way she hummed to herself, the way she tied her hair as though nothing about our lives was falling apart. Betrayal wears the mask of normality so easily, but once you see the cracks, you can't unsee them. That night, I lay in bed beside her, listening to her steady breathing, while I stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself, "This ends on my terms, not hers." In the morning, I installed the GPS tracker into her car, pretending to be adjusting something while she gathered her things. She laughed when she kissed me goodbye, said she'd be home late because of a meeting, and I smiled because I already knew where she was going. I spent hours staring at the little red dot on my phone, watching it drift across town, not toward her office, but toward the hotel. My heart didn't shatter anymore, it hardened. The next day, I checked her phone. When she showered, the messages were there, playful, flirty, filled with promises. Every line was a nail in the coffin of our marriage, but also fuel for my fire. I didn't scream at her, I didn't confront her, because revenge doesn't need noise and needs timing. For now, I wear the mask of the loving husband, cooking dinner, cleaning the dishes, asking her about her day, as if I cared. She thought I was blind, but I was wide awake. I started collecting things, screenshots, receipts, recordings, the subtle perfume on her jacket that wasn't hers. Every piece of evidence was another weapon hidden in my pocket. She held me at night and whispered, "You're my everything," and I let her, because I wanted her to believe I was still fooled. But deep down I whispered back, "You'll soon understand what betrayal really feels like." I wasn't broken, I was preparing. The following week I watched her more closely than ever, but never let it show. She still smiled the same way, still tied her scarf the same way, still kissed me goodbye, as if she were leaving for an ordinary day at work. Only now I have the quiet hum of the GPS on my phone to remind me where she really went. Each time she claimed to be in meetings, the little red dot betrayed her, driving across town, circling the same streets, stopping at the same hotel. I followed once, not too close, just enough to see her car parked in the lot, glowing under the yellow lights of the evening. I sat in my car, gripping the wheels so tight my knuckles turned white, watching her walk inside, laughing on the phone. My chest burned, but I forced myself to stay calm because anger would only ruin the masterpiece I was creating. The lies she fed me at home became almost laughable as I held proof in my hands. She told me one night she had to prepare files late with her boss, and I nodded while scrolling through photos. I had already taken of her walking hand in hand with him through the lobby. Betrayal was no longer an idea, it was a living, breathing thing staring back at me through every image. I kept my silence, my patience sharper than any blade. At dinners with friends, she wrapped her arm around mine, painted the picture of a happy wife, and I returned the performance with a smile that masked the storm inside. I started to record the small details, the way she left her phone face down on the table, the nervous glance when a message buzzed, the hurried explanations about late nights. Each clue was a thread, and I wove them together into a net she couldn't escape. Sometimes at night I'd look at her sleeping beside me and wonder how she could rest so easily while living two lives. But instead of breaking me, it steeled me. I knew every lie she spoke was bringing me closer to the moment when the mask would fall. And so I played my role, letting her believe she had fooled me, letting her think I was blind, all the while waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Night, I finally saw them together, the last piece of the illusion shattered. She told me she had to stay late at the office again, her voice smooth, her eyes steady, as if she had rehearsed the line 100 times before. I kissed her cheek and wished her luck, then waited 10 minutes before sliding into my car and following the quiet glow of the tracker on my phone. The little red dot pulsed across the map, leading me not to her office, but to the far side of town where the lights were softer and the streets quieter. I parked across the street from the hotel and waited, my hands trembling against the steering wheel, not from fear, but from the raw electricity of truth about to reveal itself. And then there she was, stepping out of her car, her hair falling loosely across her shoulders, her face brighter than I had seen in months. She wasn't tired from work, she wasn't drained from meetings, she was alive, glowing as if she were walking into the arms of salvation. He was waiting for her just outside the lobby, tall, confident, smiling in that way a man smiles when he thinks he has stolen something precious. I watched them greet each other, his hand sliding easily into hers as if it belonged there. They walked inside together, laughing, leaning close, whispering in a language of intimacy that should have been mine. My chest felt like it had been split open, but no tears came, only a cold, heavy silence that wrapped itself around me. Across the street, I sat in the dark, watching them through the glass walls of the restaurant inside. A candle flickered between them. His fingers traced the back of her hand, the same hand she used to hold mine. Every laugh was a dagger, every smile another fracture in the shell of our life together. But instead of breaking, I grew still. The betrayal no longer hid in shadows. It was right there in the open, illuminated by candlelight, undeniable. That was the moment I stopped asking why or how. That was the moment the part of me that begged for answers finally died. What rose in its place was resolve, not the frantic rage of a wounded man, but the focused calm of someone who had already chosen his battlefield. I turned the key in the ignition, my face empty, my heart steady, because now I no longer needed proof, I no longer needed suspicion. I had seen the truth with my own eyes, and that truth would be the very weapon I used to end this game. Revenge didn't come to me in a flash of rage, it came in the quiet hours when the house was still, and she slept peacefully beside me. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of her betrayal pressing against my chest until the silence itself began to shape a plan. I didn't scream at her, I didn't confront her, I didn't let her see the storm that was building. Instead, I smiled on the mornings, poured her coffee, kissed her goodbye, and watched her drive off to the man she thought I didn't know about. What she didn't realize was that every day I was gathering pieces of her lies, turning them into weapons. Screenshots of messages stolen while her phone charged on the counter, receipts folded neatly in my drawer, recordings of conversations when she thought I wasn't listening. But evidence wasn't enough. I wanted her to feel what I felt, to stand in the center of a room and realize she had no escape. Patience became my armor, silence my sharpest blade. I studied her patterns, the times she left, the excuses she repeated, the careless way she carried on, believing she was safe. I began choosing moments when she would never suspect, the smallest acts that seemed like love, but were really the scaffolding of her downfall. All the while I spoke gently, held her claws, played the part of the faithful husband. Because the sweetest revenge is not rushed, it is crafted. The more lies she told me, the more control I felt, because I knew the truth, and the truth was mine to unleash. She thought she was winning, but in reality, every step she took deeper into her betrayal was one step closer to the moment I would end it all with a single blow. I didn't set out to poison anyone. I didn't want blood or permanent damage. What I wanted was exposure, a bright, impossible to ignore stain on the life they'd been hiding from me. So I prepared quietly, like someone assembling a camera, careful, deliberate, knowing exactly when to press record. I didn't shout. I didn't rage. I arranged for a moment that would make their lies obvious to everyone who ever trusted them. The day it happened, I watched the little red dot on my phone and felt the old, familiar calm settle over me. I parked where I could see without being seen, a thermos of coffee beside me and binoculars in my lap. The hotel's neon sign hummed in the heat. People drifted past with a untroubled indifference of strangers. And inside a door that would become the fulcrum of everything. The private life they had kept hidden unfolded like a stage rehearsal. When the commotion finally started, it was small at first, a caw, a hand clamping at a throat, the quick exchange of confused words. Then it escalated. More noise, a scramble, the harsh, bright efficiency of staff and strangers converting a private moment into public spectacle. People filmed with their phones. Someone called for help. By the time the paramedics left, the two of them were a wet, ridiculous tableau of panic and green stains and explanations that looked thin and implausible when placed against what everyone now saw on a screen. I watched them emerge from the hotel like actors after a botched scene, disheveled, ashamed, faces burning under the wash of fluorescent lights. The video spread the way things do in small towns and big cities alike, instant, merciless. Within hours, friends texted, neighbors peered over fences, and strangers on social media turned their phones into jury and judge. The headline jokes began: green lovers, bathroom betrayal, viral humiliation. I didn't laugh at first. I simply felt the quiet satisfaction of a plan executed without clumsiness, without the messy theatrics people expect from revenge. They came home thinking they could manage the narrative, patch it with plausible stories about a chemical spill or a prank gone wrong. But evidence is its own language. Witnesses spoke. Clips multiplied. Even the versions they offered strained under the pressure of what everyone now knew. Clara's face, once polished, composed, practiced, looked raw and small in the glow of so many phone screens. Charles, who believed charm could paper over every misstep, found his confidence stripped away in one terrible, public afternoon when she sat at our kitchen table that night and told me how terrified she'd been, how it burned, and how she'd never imagined this would happen. I listened. I let her words hang there, fragile. She searched my face for something: remorse, anger, the predictable breakdown of a betrayed husband, but I had already passed that script. What she saw instead was a man who had chosen consequence over spectacle, who had built a window wide enough that every lie could finally be seen. The town had its story. We all did. Some whispered sympathy. Others snickered. But most of them began to look at Clara and Charles with the wary curiosity that comes when you realize someone you trusted might have been acting. And for the first time since I found that receipt in her purse, I felt the weight inside me shift. It wasn't joy. It wasn't cruelty. It was a hard, steady relief, like an arm that had found its balance again. The days after Ethan's collapse blurred together into a haze of hospital corridors, beeping monitors, and the sterile scent of disinfectant that clung to everything I wore. I had barely slept, barely eaten, moving only on instinct as if my body was on autopilot. Every time his chest rose and fell, I held my breath, afraid that one day it might not. When the doctors spoke, their words came in fragments, complications, observation, tests like puzzle pieces that never seemed to fit together. I sat by his bed, fingers brushing the cold rail, whispering things he couldn't hear. Or maybe he could, I didn't know anymore. Time became a cruel trickster, stretching endlessly in waiting rooms, and then snapping forward in sudden bursts of panic whenever an alarm went off. People around me moved with purpose: nurses, interns, specialists, while I felt like a ghost trapped in limbo, invisible and powerless. The outside world didn't stop. I caught glimpses of it through the hospital's glass doors, snow piling on sidewalks, strangers hurrying past with coffees in their hands, living lives that didn't feel shattered. And yet, for me, Nothing existed beyond that hospital room, beyond the fragile rhythm of Ethan's breathing. Every second became a prayer. I didn't know how to speak. Every silence a reminder of how close I was to losing everything. When Ethan finally opened his eyes, it was as if the world had shifted, as if the unbearable weight pressing down on my chest had lifted for a fleeting moment. His gaze was weak, clouded, but it was him, still here, still tattered to me in some fragile way. I reached for his hand and felt the faint squeeze of his fingers, enough to make tears slip down my face before I could stop them. The doctors came and went, their words guarded, careful not to promise too much, but all I cared about was that he was awake. The days that followed were a delicate balance of hope and fear, moments of laughter when he managed to whisper a joke, followed by long stretches of silence when exhaustion pulled him under again. I learned how quickly the human heart could swing between despair and joy, how thin the line was between losing someone and holding them close. At night, I would sit by the window, staring at the city lights scattered like tiny fires in the distance, wondering if the universe was giving me back what it had almost taken away or simply reminding me of how fragile everything truly was.